must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.
A very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for finding time to join me today. My name is Miriam Ogutu, and the show is Diaspora Dispatches, where we get to look at the news making headlines across the continent. And of course, I have so much in store for you, and I trust that you've been well. So let's just get into it. And we start with the latest from Ivory Coast. We know the country is gearing up to its elections next month, and there has been some controversy when President Alassane Ouattara decided to run again against the constitution. And right now, a ban on public demonstrations in Ivory Coast ends on Wednesday, just as the opposition plans to begin a campaign of civil disobedience against President Alassane Ouattara's third-term bid. The opposition is demanding changes to the Constitutional Court, the Electoral Commission, and the withdrawal of Mr. Ouattara's candidacy. Mr. Ouattara has accused the opposition of scaring the public in order to disrupt the electoral process. International Crisis Group has urged the Ivorian Authority to allow former President Laurent Gbagbo and exiled ex-Speaker Guillaume Soro to return to the country. And then we go to Uganda, where the East African Court of Justice will today rule on a challenge to a decision by Uganda's Supreme Court to uphold a constitutional amendment that removed the age limit for presidential candidates. The 2017 amendment eliminated the requirement that candidates vying for the presidency be under 75 years old. It allowed President Yoweri Museveni, who is over 75 years old, to run for another 5-year term in January 2021 general elections. He has been in power since 1986. Lawyer Male Mabirizi went to the East African Court based in neighboring Tanzania to challenge the Supreme Court's verdict, and he wants the clause on age limit for presidential candidates reinstated. He said in court papers that the constitutional amendment was done through violence and deployment of military police in the outside parliament, the Daily Monitor newspaper in Uganda has reported. We head over to Guinea, where Guinea has closed its border with Senegal and Guinea-Bissau ahead of the general election. A government official was quoted to have said that by AFP news agency. The official said the closure was for security reasons. Now, Guinea-Bissau's Interior Minister Boche Kande said the border had been closed since Sunday, but its Guinean counterpart did not confirm this. Guinea's President Alpha Conde is seeking controversial third term in the 18th October general elections. The president is taking advantage of a new constitution to circumvent a two-term presidential term limit. And then we come back we go to South Sudan, and South Sudan's government has not made public the record of its expenditure for 3 years, the United Nations peacekeeping mission in South Sudan, UNMISS, has said. The revelations follow last week's report by United Nations Human Rights Commission that alleged that high-ranking politicians and bureaucrats in South Sudan embezzled at least $36 million from government coffers in 2016. The government has not yet commented. And then we go to Ethiopia, where veteran Ethiopian human rights advocate and political leader Mesfin Walde Mariam has died at the age of 90 in the capital city, Addis Ababa. He had been known as a critical figure of successive governments. Mr. Mesfin founded the Ethiopian Human Rights Council, a rights watchdog. He joined the opposition Coalition for Unity and Democracy during the disputed election in 2005. We go to South Africa, and South Africa's former President Jacob Zuma has requested the head of a commission investigating corruption during his presidency to step aside over alleged bias, his lawyers have said. Mr. Zuma has failed to reappear before the commission as he has been requested, but Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo has set a non-negotiable date for him to appear. Allegations of corruption dogged Mr. Zuma's presidency and led to him to resign in February 2018. The former president's lawyer has said that he will not take part until Mr. Zondo is replaced. And then we go to Rwanda, where a top French appeals court is to rule today on whether alleged Rwandan genocide financier Felicien Kabuga will stand trial in France or face a United Nations tribunal in Tanzania. Kabuga, who is 84 years old but claims to be 87, was arrested in May at his home outside Paris after 25 years on the run in 1994. The Rwandan genocide of some 8,000 people were killed by Hutu extremists when they targeted Tutsis as well as moderate Hutus. Kabuga, who was one of Rwanda's richest men, is alleged to have funneled money to militia groups. He also accused of setting up a militia that carried out massacres as well as radio broadcasts inciting people to murder. A French court ruled in June that he would stand trial in Tanzania, but his lawyers appealed, citing fears that an African United Nations tribunal will be biased. And then we go to Cameroon, and the leader of the movement of rebirth of Cameroon, MRC, a party, Maurice Kamto, is demanding an explanation from the Cameroonian government in an interview on Monday for what he perceives to be a de facto house arrest in light of deployment of law enforcement patrolling his residence day and night following demonstrations by his party last Tuesday against the regime of Paul Biya. Kamto claims ignorance of his supposed charges, as he has also been allowed to meet with some of his lawyers, although a spokesperson of the Cameroonian government issued a statement on Friday vowing to hold the organizers of last week's rally accountable for their actions before the courts, with the MRC being subjected to special attention. We head over to Zimbabwe, and Zimbabwe's main opposition party is denying an accusation from a state security official that it is plotting a coup attempt. State Security Minister Owen Kube offered no evidence for his accusation made on Monday, and political analysts warn Zimbabwe has a history of using such allegations to crack down on opposition parties. Clifford Haitiawayo, a spokesperson for the Movement of Democratic Change, that is MDC party, dismissed a claim from State Security Minister Owen Kube that the party is smuggling guns into the country for a coup. And then we go to Somalia, where Somali journalists and rights groups are criticizing President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo for remarks as he made on Saturday condemning the country's journalists. Farmajo said Somali journalists lacked training and experience and accused some of them for working for the militant group Al-Shabaab. Now, the Somali Journalists Syndicate, an organization that fights for media rights and freedom in the Horn of Africa nation, has come out against the president's remarks against the journalists. President Abdullahi Farmajo, of course, was responding to questions at a public function on Saturday when he called Somali journalists untrained and inexperienced. He also said they work, of course, for the terror group Al-Shabaab. And then we head over to Mali. Let's check on with Mali and see what's happening there. And the lifting of crippling economic sanctions against Mali by a bloc of 15 Western African countries will come later than first thought, even after the appointment of Mali's new transitional civilian Prime Minister Mokhtar Oune. ECOWAS imposed sanctions on Mali shortly after last month's coup that ousted President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta. The group said they would lift sanctions after civilian leaders were appointed during the transition period. But the French news press reports a sticking point to the West African leaders may be junta leader Colonel Assimi Goïta's appointment as the transitional vice president. Goïta was among the junta leaders who were involved in the coup. We head back to South Sudan, and the United Nations Special Envoy to South Sudan on Tuesday said almost no progress has been made in unifying the country's warring forces under one army as promised under a hard-fought peace deal. The pledge to bring government and rebel soldiers under a national banner was a cornerstone of a September 2018 peace agreement that paused 5 years of bloodshed in which over 380,000 people had died. But troops brought together at joint training sites across the troubled country were deserted because of a lack of food and other essentials, as said the United Nations mission in South Sudan, of course, through their special representative David Shearer. Now, there was a risk of renewed violence as soldiers disillusioned with the promise of peace returned to their villages hungry and frustrated, Mr. Shearer added. Shearer also criticized South Sudan's government army for interfering with peacekeeping missions by UN troops tasked with protecting civilians and aid workers in hotspots plagued by armed arrest. Last month, he said 92 blue helmets were prevented from taking up positions at a new UN base in Lobonok, some 110 kilometers from Juba, by government troops who have been fighting for the National Salvation Front, a holdout rebel group. And then we go to Sierra Leone, and the authorities in Sierra Leone have imposed a travel ban on former President Ernest Bai Koroma and several officials who served during his term over allegations of corruption. Mr. Koroma and more than 100 people will not be allowed to leave the country. They have been ordered to pay back stolen money, forfeit their houses, or they will be further investigated. Mr. Koroma's opposition, All People's Congress Party, has dismissed the allegations. A lawyer for the party has said that they will go to court to challenge the ruling. And then we end with the news from Nigeria, where militants linked to the Islamic State group have used a donkey strapped with explosives to ambush the convoy this happened some days back, a convoy of the governor of Nigeria's northeastern Borno state. Governor Babagana Zulum was returning to the capital Maiduguri from Baga town when they were ambushed. Sunday's attack came 2 days after he had survived another attack while traveling to an area near Lake Chad. At least 18 people were killed in that ambush. Among them were 14 police officers and soldiers and 4 civilians. So that is the latest news from the continent this afternoon. Thank you so much for watching. I think the main thing there that caught my attention was this news from of course, Cameroon. We know that the official opposition leader there, Professor Maurice Kamto, had organized for a rally sometimes back last week, I think the 22nd of September, and they were going to protest against, the demanding for electoral reforms, and also, most importantly, they are demanding for Paul Biya's government to address the matter to do with Anglophones. But he was not able to physically be part of this protest that his party had organized and other opposition, parties there, because his house was surrounded by soldiers and still have, even days after that protest happened, and he's been told that if he steps out of his house, he will be arrested. So he's now been, held in his house. He's not been able to leave, and they perceive this to be a de facto house arrest in light of deployed law enforcement who are patrolling his residence day and night. So he's enjoying some state security there, but that is not something that Professor Maurice Kamto really wants. Democracy in Cameroon is quite something there, so as it is in so many other African countries. And we know that after the election that happened in Cameroon in 2018, Professor Maurice Kamto was not really convinced President Paul Biya won those elections. Matter of fact, he tried organizing some demonstrations to protest against what he said was an election that was marred with a lot of irregularities that could by no means, have afforded President Paul Biya a chance to lead that country. Paul Biya has been the president of Cameroon for around 38 years right now, so he's been there long enough, and I think Professor Maurice Kamto believes that he will be the person to replace President Paul Biya. And Paul Biya is thinking, no, you know what, I think he's 87 right now, but, I'm still strong enough to stay over here as the president of Cameroon, despite the fact that I've been here 38 years, but I'm not planning to relinquish, the leadership of Cameroon anytime soon. So it has been a tussle. So he had organized for a protest last week that, of course, was met with a lot of force, and the protesters were tear gassed. Matter of fact, one of them, I think, died. Was it from a gun shot, I think, last week when that protesting was happening. And since then, Professor Kamto has been held in his house by the virtue of, the security forces just surrounding his house a day and night. So he's scared of going out, and he's been told, if you come out, we're going to arrest you anyway. So, it's quite an interesting, thing that is happening in Cameroon. And I don't know what African Union is saying about, things like this. I think there should be anchored in a lot of our constitutions in this continent is the freedom to even assemble, and voice whatever it is that you want, petition. I mean, it is embedded in our constitutions, but of course the government of Paul Biya was saying during these times of COVID-19, perhaps it will not be a nice thing. But we know even similar protests have been thwarted before when there was no COVID-19. So I don't know until when, Maurice Kamto will be held, in his house, basically under house arrest without even asking. He's been receiving state security that he does not want to enjoy at all. And of course, that story from South Africa of former President Jacob Zuma, who is now requesting the head of a commission investigating corruption during his presidency to step aside over alleged bias. His lawyers have said Mr. Zuma has failed to reappear before the commission as has been requested, but Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo has set a non-negotiable date for him to appear. And now Zuma's side is saying that, they will not appear until that judge, that Chief Justice, the Deputy Chief Justice is removed and is replaced and is not part of that commission. He's been facing a lot of charges to do with corruption. I know every time Zuma is mentioned, we've heard of the Gupta family. It's a whole lot of story I will not even get into. Also, his son also was facing almost similar charges, but I think he was acquitted of some of those charges. And now his father's been going through trial there. A lot of time, the time he was sick. Other time, there's always looking for some excuse to to keep pushing, for this. A hearing not to happen. It appears some tactics there that former President Jacob Zuma has been doing with his lawyers there. So there's always an excuse why he's not going to attend those hearing, or rather the commission. That is through the commission investigating, corruption. That commission that was set to investigate the state of the nation, the state of corruption there in South Africa. And I don't know, Jacob Zuma might keep playing hide and seek with the law, but I'm sure now that the Deputy Chief Justice has said the date that has been set is non-negotiable, I think they've played enough of these games, and they're saying enough is enough. Mr. President, or rather Mr. Former President, show yourself up here, because we have some business to do and we have some accountability that we'd like for you to take over whatever happened when you were president of South Africa. And Somalia's President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo made these very interesting remarks on Saturday when he condemned the country's journalists. I don't know, as a president who understands the difficulties of how much difficulties the country of Somalia has been going through. We know they have a lot of challenges, especially in their education system. And just a couple of weeks ago here, I was reading this news item where even the minister, there was a committee in parliament that was questioning why is it that the schools that are in the capital are not doing very well after the national exams results came out, and it appeared that the schools that were closer to the Kenyan border did very well compared to the ones that were far off, because I guess the ones near the Kenyan border are able to access even maybe education materials or whatever it is from the Kenyan side, so it much better. And so there has been some challenges, some structural challenges, a lot of challenges with a lot of, the sectors there in that country, and rightfully so because of the civil war that has continued and that ravaged that country. And so Somalia has not had an opportunity to build up its system again, to build up its education system again, to build up its health system again. It's just trying to set up and come from the ashes and start rebuilding itself. So for President Farmajo to come out and condemn its journalists, the journalists of Somalia, and owing to all that history, that he should be better placed to understand as a president, I think the much he can do is just to perhaps, just try to encourage them, because working in Somalia as a journalist, I'm assuming, because I've not been there, might not be the easiest of things to do. Perhaps the facilities there are not as any other place, say a place like Kenya or other places, developed places across the world. And also, I don't know if they even have a journalism school there in Somalia. Perhaps they do. And we know the threats that exist, and all the challenges. President Farmajo, you understand better. So I think as the head of state of a country that is still going through a bit of a turmoil, and they're just trying to set itself up, and a lot of things are just out of order there in Somalia, I think the least you could do is just show some support. They may not be as world class as what we see in any country, that you feel does better, but still, owing to the circumstances under which they have to train and work in Somalia, I think, I don't know if a criticism coming from you and in that manner is even building, any level of any level of confidence, even in the journalists themselves or people who are trying to pursue their careers there in Somalia, owing to the circumstances there in Somalia and the prevailing circumstances there and everything else that happens in that country. So President Farmajo condemned Somalia's journalist, and he said the journalist lacked training and experience. Of course they lack training and experience. Show me how many journalism schools exist there in Somalia, and if they do they have the facilities? Do they have a conducive learning environment? The whole education system in Somalia has been challenged by the prevailing circumstances. So they may not be getting what they should be getting because of, one, the insecurity that they have to learn under, and then they have experience where where do you expect that the journalists in Somalia have gone out and had experience? Because the country is just trying to build itself up right now. So I don't know where you expected for them to go training and have experience. So perhaps just being employed there by the local media is just the experience now that they're starting to gain in their places of work. And also, I think the key thing that he also said, that the local journalists there are working with the militant group Al-Shabaab now. I think that is so damning, there. And of course, Somali Journalists Syndicate, this is an organization that fights for media rights and freedom in Somalia. They came out and they're not really amused by what President Farmajo said there. And of course, he was at a function. He was at a function there on Saturday, President Farmajo, public function, when he came out to attack his own country's journalists, calling them untrained, inexperienced, unprofessional, and all of that. I think that is just out of order. As a president, I think you have a work to also inspire. And this is a generation of people who are just trying to do perhaps the best under the circumstances, which are not really quite favorable for anybody. We've seen cases and reports from Somalia and under international journalists. I think they were just trying to take up, some data and how is it the places that are even more dangerous for a journalist to work in, and Somalia was just one of them. So the journalists in Somalia there, they're just trying to do the best they can under the circumstances, Mr. President, and for you coming out and criticizing them in this manner, you're not inspiring any confidence. As a head of state, you have a responsibility. You're like the father figure of the country, and you're supposed to inspire confidence. Even if you have to criticize, let it be a bit constructive. But you can't just decide, you are all very inexperienced, you are all very you lack the proper training, while you understand better than anybody, as I said there, what they have to go through. Maybe you don't understand, but the circumstances there in Somalia, Mr. President Farmajo, they're not conducive for anybody to learn anything. And so they're just doing the best they can. And if I were you, I'll perhaps encourage the media organizations there to try organize, to find ways to challenge them, to find ways in which the journalists in the country could make themselves better, perhaps organize workshops to be carried out, or take them out of the country for them to go have short-term workshops, so they're able to have the experience, they're able to be exposed to other things, so that when they come back, that's how you become better, because with journalism, the more you do it, the better you become. But also, I think the enabling environment is very important, and I don't know if that is what they have there in Somalia. All right, so President Farmajo, what the people there in your country require is not for you to condemn them like that, and then for him to say that Somali journalists work in cahoots with Al-Shabaab. That is quite interesting, coming from a heads of state. I think that is perhaps a conversation I will have here some other time when Doctor is around. And the United Nations Special Envoy to South Sudan on Tuesday said almost no progress has been made in unifying countries' warring forces under one army, as promised under a hard-fought peace deal. So remember, one of the sticking issues during the 2018 revitalized peace agreement was the unification of the forces there in South Sudan. And if you've been watching, I think this is a conversation we've had one time too many. Like we've talked about this even before the inking of that peace deal back in February. We're like, these people, the only thing we hear them complain about is the states. They were not agreeing on the states. Remember, it became such a huge problem and other things. And we were thinking, there is one key thing that is quite a component that is quite important in this revitalized peace agreement. And one of those, I think, is far much important than even the number of states they have there in South Sudan, would be the unification of the army there in South Sudan, because every person, every leader there, they seem to be having their own army, their own generals, their own militia groups. They just have their own security apparatus that differs from the rest. And so this has posed a serious challenge when it comes to just consolidating the country's security. It has been a complete challenge, and as we see what has been happening even after that peace deal was signed in February, nothing much has changed there in South Sudan. We hear reporting every day about the communal attacks and killings that are happening, and of course a lot of soldiers, even according to the United Nations, they're saying that there was a risk of renewed violence as soldiers, disillusioned with the promise of peace, return to their villages hungry and frustrated. And might I add, when they're leaving those camps, the cantonment camps, going back to their villages, disillusioned and disappointed. They're leaving, they're going back with their guns. They're not leaving the guns there at the barracks and go back, or the containment sites and go back. They leave with their guns. So that is the danger. And that now has led to a mushrooming of an increased, communal violence, and people are being killed there. People are already leaving their villages as if we don't even have enough refugees there in South Sudan. So this is a matter that the leadership of South Sudan has not been able to address adequately, and it appears of everything else they look like they're looking at and trying to find a solution to. The unification of South Sudan's army it's not something that they've even tried to approach in a manner that will actually make sure that they're able to sort out this matter quickly, and then they're able to move on with other issues that are also very important to the people there of South Sudan. So according to the United Nations, who is the special envoy, the United Nations special envoy to South Sudan, Mr. David Shearer, he criticized South Sudan's government army for interfering with peacekeeping missions by UN troops tasked with protecting civilians and aid workers in hotspots plagued by armed unrest. And remember, also the UN troops have been accused because there has been a lot of things that have been happening near the camp, killings, abductions, and all of that has been happening where very close proximity, where you would expect they will come in and try to peacekeep or do whatever it is that they are mandated to be doing there in South Sudan, but they have failed to do that. And so we saw even a couple of weeks ago, South Sudanese around that area coming out and protesting and saying, okay, so you're present, you have a huge presence here, a whole camp, but you're still getting attacked, you're still getting killed. So please explain to us what your job here is, because we are supposed to feel safe and we are supposed to be safe here, but that is not the case. And so now, according to the United Nations, apparently now South Sudan's government army have been interfering with the peacekeeping missions by the United Nations troops, and this is something quite serious. So I don't know how President Salva Kiir will have to respond to some of these allegations. Now, last month, he said, Mr. Shearer, that is the United Nations Special Envoy to South Sudan, said 92 blue helmets were prevented from taking up positions at a new United Nations base in Lobonok, some 110 kilometers from Juba, by government troops who have been fighting the National Salvation Front, a holdout rebel group. So the issue of insecurity in South Sudan, I think, is quite murky. And the unification of the South Sudanese army also is very important, because You can't find a lasting, peaceful solution unless the army is together. I've not known any country where you have different factions of the army, and that country was, I don't even know such a country exists, and we see such countries like Libya, where you have one faction of the army with the General Khalifa Haftar and the other one with the United Nations backed government. I mean, it's a recipe for disaster, and we've seen what is happening there, and also what is happening in South Sudan. So I think unification of the South Sudanese army has to be a priority, has to be addressed as quick as possible, so that by coming together, now they can be assured of the country's security, and also they'll be able to address other issues in a more better, I think, secure environment, or if that is even possible. Thank you so much for your time. This has been Diaspora Dispatches. My name is Miriam Ogotu. Thank you for watching, and a very good afternoon to you. Bye-bye for now.
Peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.